Hello plant lovers, welcome to the first of my hopefully many videos about basic plant care. Now, first thing for me to say is that I am no expert at all. Let's just say a passionate amateur, but I have learned a few things along the way about trying to get some orchids to bloom and other rare and sort of unusual plants here in Melbourne. So I just thought I'd share some of the things I've discovered to maybe help you in your own orchid journey. And today we're going to talk about Oncidiums, as mine, this one here, is just about to end its flowering season, and so it needs to be repotted. So I thought we might talk about basic Oncidium care. So firstly, Oncidiums are relatively easy to grow and really gorgeous. This one has the most amazing sort of spicy chocolate fragrance. Now there are other Oncidiums that are incredibly fragrant. This one is called Pacific Sunrise Hakalau, I think that's how you pronounce it. So there are more chocolatey, sweeter Oncidiums out there, lots of great fragrant ones, but this was amazing. The funny thing is, I got it to flower for the first time last year, and it was somewhere sort of, off the beaten track, and I wasn't that close to it, so I didn't notice the fragrance. This year I put it on our dining table just so we could look at it every time we're having breakfast and lunch, and I thought, what is that amazing smell? And then realized it's the Oncidium. So here am I proving my amateur status. I had no idea that one of the great features of Oncidium orchids is in fact their fragrance. So let's get to basics. Firstly, they are, like most orchids, largely epiphytic. So you need light media, but we'll get to that. They're from South America and the Caribbean area, varying altitudes, so you can get some Oncidiums that are more cool tolerant and some that are warmer. So I live in Melbourne, which is obviously Southern Hemisphere, and it's a temperate climate, but Melbourne has a very tricky climate. Cold winters like today can get down to 1 or 2 degrees at night centigrade, and winter maximum can be 12, 13, 14 degrees, so relatively chilly. A sunny winter's day, 17, 18 degrees Celsius, but in summer it can be all over the place. It can be very wet. You can get up to 45 degrees Celsius, which happened last summer, and everything in between. So Melbourne is quite notorious for having 4 seasons in one day and quite patchy weather. However, this Oncidium is relatively cool tolerant, but not to the coolness of a Melbourne winter. So what I do is I keep it outside in summer and I bring it inside for the 2 or 3 coldest months when the temperatures start to really drop below 10 degrees centigrade. So when it's outside, it gets a little bit of morning light, and I've realized that it really loves a little bit of direct sunlight in the morning. Not too much, because you don't want to burn the leaves or damage the roots. So it gets very early morning sun for maybe not quite an hour, and then it's under quite a shaded position outside, so it doesn't get any more direct sun. So you need to be careful about if you're growing them outside, if that's your climatic area, no harsh afternoon sun, no strong winds, etc. So where I have them outside, it's quite protected. It's got a solid clear roof so they don't get rained on, and it's quite enclosed. So that is the story with this Oncidium. So light-wise, moderate, as I said, it gets early morning sun and then sort of covered shelter. And this has thrived. It's flowered for me twice, which is remarkable. I'm very happy about that. Watering, Oncidium hybrids kind of don't have a resting period necessarily, I've discovered. So obviously you water them less in winter. So a little often for me in winter. I still spray it to spritz its humidity and keep its humidity levels up, and I sit it in a clay dish with some little clay pebbles, which I tend to keep a little bit moist so that the clay of the pot is acting like a little humidifier, really, which is quite lovely. I'm also just aesthetically hung up on clay pots, so that's my thing. Other people swear by plastic with holes in, but I just don't like plastic. Anyway, fertilizer wise, I give it a little often, really, not obviously so much in winter. So this has flowered autumn. It's an autumn flower here in the Southern Hemisphere, this particular one. So I tend to just increase fertilizer a little bit more, obviously, from spring through summer, and when it starts to go into its growth phase. So in winter, just ease up. It's kind of common sense, I've found. Less water, much less food. Just make sure it doesn't dry out too much. Now in summer, obviously, it needs a lot more water because this one lives outside, so Melbourne summers can be quite drying and harsh. So I mist everything quite well outside, usually once in the morning, to create a little humid environment for them. and water it a little often most days just to make sure that it doesn't dry out, because Melbourne is a very dry heat. Okay, now let's talk about pseudobulbs. So I didn't know any of this terminology, but this thing here is a pseudobulb. And this I bought as a seedling. So the seedling was basically just this first pseudobulb here. It then grows another pseudobulb from the front, and then another one, and then another one. So you can sort of see here, there is a linear progression from the back one to this one, to this one, and this one here. So they generally flower from the newest pseudobulb, as this one has done, and it flowered last year from this pseudobulb here. What you might also be able to see is that my pseudobulbs are a little wrinkly, as am I, which is an indication that the moisture levels are not quite right. Again, I don't panic or get hung up about it. It tends to balance itself out. I'm really aware of not wanting to overwater it in winter. And we have quite a drying heat in the house, unfortunately. So there you go. But it's give and take in this world. This Oncidium seems quite happy. So what's next? The flowers, which is unfortunate, are just about at the end of their lifespan, but they were so beautiful. The fragrance was amazing, which I discovered accidentally for the second time it flowered. So, repotting. When this flower has just about died, which I imagine in probably another week or so, the flowers lasted a long time though, over a month. It was amazing. So probably half of them have dropped off now, so I'll give it another week or so and let more flowers drop off. And then we need to repot. So the next growth is going to come from somewhere around here, the next pseudobulb. And I'm not sure that we can see anything just yet. It's a little early. So when it starts to get into that growth phase, that's when I'm going to need to repot this. And Oncidiums don't like their roots being disturbed that often. Who does? So it's a good idea to not do it annually, but I'm really on a needs basis. They are also like to be relatively pot bound as well. So you don't want a massive pot. I'm just going to increase this pot size 1 up, I think. And as the pseudobulbs go in this linear progression, you need to make sure that this part of the plant, which is the newest pseudobulb, needs to be more towards the center of the pot to give the plant more space to grow forward. So that's something I will need to do. When I come to repot it, I might make another video. So that's basic Oncidium care for you. As I said, this one has bloomed for me twice. It was a seedling 3 years ago, so it bloomed very quickly. It was half indoors, half outdoors. It summers outdoors and it winters indoors like the best of us. And it manages quite well. It's loved a little bit of direct sunlight. It seems to be happy with the moisture level I'm giving it, although the bulbs are a little wrinkly, so it might need a bit more. But otherwise, quite easy to care for in your own home. So do give Oncidiums a go. And here's a handy hint. If you go to garden centres or florists, when they're in bloom, the plants are obviously at their most expensive. But if you've got a bit of confidence and you think, oh, I can manage this, why don't you wait till the flowers are dying in the florist? And they generally discount the plant, so you might get it half price. I know that sounds cheap, but anyway, if you want to feed your orchid obsession, maybe that's the way to go. Or have a go at buying seedlings, which are really inexpensive. If you're patient enough to wait a couple of years, you'll get a bloom. So there you go. Orchid Lesson 101 from a rank amateur, but I'm just sharing some of my experience with this one, which seems to be happy. Thanks for watching. I will make more videos, so if you're interested, do subscribe, do leave a message and click like. Tell me what else you might be interested in. Next week, we might look at Australian native orchids, which are just forming their flower spikes. I'll show you a couple of species that I've got and give you an idea of how I look after them. In the meantime, take care, enjoy growing things. It's great for your mental health at this crazy pandemic time, and I'll see you soon.